Well, hello and welcome back. This is Jennifer McGuire, and I hope you had a good weekend. Well, today I am sharing more ideas for die cut edge cards. I've done videos like this in the past, but I have some new ideas for you today. I will link to those other die cut edge cards here if you haven't seen them before. But the nice thing about today's video is that you can use any shape dies for these, border dies, regular dies, coordinating dies, anything you have. So I have a few different examples for you. We're going to start with the card that you see here, and this actually has two unique bordered die cut edges. So the shape of the card is different and makes it unique. This is the new Concord and 9th City Stacks stamp set. I really like the playful design of these images and also the sentiments. I really like the unique sentiments. And here is the coordinating die set that I will use to go along with this. I'm just showing you the image because I cut all my dies apart and they're all over my desk, and I was having trouble kind of reining them in to show you. So instead you get the picture. Now for this card design, you could use just two regular border dies if that's all you have. I'm starting with a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch white note card that I created, and I'm placing the tree die all the way to the top, and I'm having it span between the crease of the card and the edge of the card on the right. So this will actually be the back of the card once it's all put together. Running that through my die cut machine, any die cut machine would work. And there we have the cut edge for the inside of the card, or the back of the card. Now it's time for the front of the card. For this one, I'm placing it lower so the trees will be seen behind it. And this is the die for the houses. Placing that down again, you'll see that the die cuts a little bit far off the edge. You see how it's hanging off the edge there? Well, I am going to do partial die cutting so it doesn't cut the other side of my card. So this is how I do partial die cutting, and it works with most die cut machines. You're just putting the top plate over the parts you want to cut. So I'm putting it over most of the border die, but that little bit past the crease there to the right that's hanging out of the plate, I'll leave that hanging out so it doesn't cut there. Now the reason this border die is longer with those long edges is because there's a unique way to use these stamps and dies. And I've done a video with a similar set in the past, and I'll link to that here if you want to see the really creative way to use these border dies. Okay, so then I can remove the tape, and we're just going to cut away that extra bit above the houses. And the way I do this is I just cut along the crease of the card, that fold of the card. Just going to cut straight down till we meet the house edge. And there we have our unique shape card with a border die on the back and the border die on the front. Okay, so now I am just stamping the images into those border die cuts. So these stamps fit perfectly in this space. I'm using my MISTI stamping tool simply because I do not want to mess it up at this point, but you can use a large acrylic block instead. I'm using the Gina K Amalgam ink. This is a black ink that is Copic friendly, watercolor friendly, and colored pencil friendly, and it stamps nice and black. So the coloring that I did for this card, I'm not going to show you because it really was nothing. I used my Copic markers to quickly color. I didn't do shading or do anything fancy. I just quickly put a little bit of color down. And I kind of went for a whimsical watercolor look with my Copics by leaving areas not perfectly colored and just kind of putting down the color quickly. So once I'm done with this, you'll see that I did do some fading from the grass line and the line in front of the houses. What I did was started like on the grass line. I started with a darker green up towards the stamped edge and then went down to a lighter green until it faded out into the white on the bottom. On the front, I stamped "In My Imaginary Neighborhood, You Would live right next door." And on the inside, I stamped "I Miss You." So you can see how you can use any border dies for this, but I really like these stamps and coordinating border dies. And because I started with a note card, I can now be sure that my card with the die cut edges still fits in the envelope. Okay, my next example uses coordinating dies for just some basic stamps. I couldn't get enough of this Concord and 9th Furry Friends stamp set. With this stamp set, there are many ways you can stamp it. You can create a few different types of bears, fox, raccoon, deer, unicorn, horse, lots of things. And there you can see the coordinating die set over to the right. Today I'm going to do a bear, a deer, and a fox using these stamps. This time I'm starting with a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of white cardstock. I'm starting with the deer die at the center, and then I'll put the other two animals next to it. I'm making sure they're as high as I can go, but leaving enough room on there to add party hats once we're done. Now I'm again going to use partial die cutting, and I want to cut about halfway along these animal heads. Anything under the cutting plate will cut, anything to the left of the edge. Anything hanging out of the cutting plate will stay connected. Partial die cutting is an excellent way to create a one-layer card. Okay, so after I've run that through, you can see that part of the heads are cut, but we need to cut between the heads. I'm using a T-ruler and a pencil to draw where I need to cut. You can use a craft knife and straight edge for this, but I decided to use my Fiskars trimmer. This trimmer is great for this because there's a little arrow on the blade, and you can line the arrow up with the die cut edge and drag it to the next die cut edge. So you can cut little areas in the middle of your card. But again, if you don't have a trimmer like this, you can use a craft knife and a straight edge. So now we have our partial die cut piece. It's time to add the stamping into it. Again, I'm using a stamping tool to be sure that I stamp them nicely, but you can use an acrylic block if that's what you have. And I stamped all of the images with black ink. Now, the fun thing about this Concord and 9th set is there are stamps included in the stamp set to stamp the coloring of these animals if you don't want to color by hand. And there are different stamps so you can change the look of the animals. So for the bear here, I'm actually going to stamp this twice with brown ink just to get a darker color. But you can see how perfectly that stamps in, and I don't have to take the time to color. Now there are other little images for like the bear face, so you can do a panda bear, you can make the fox into a raccoon, lots of different images, and it really makes it fun to kind of create different looking animals. So there you can see I stamped all those with brown inks, and it took no time at all. I also stamped and colored and die cut little party hats and little bow ties from the same stamp set. And I'm adding them together with Gina K Connect Glue. This is a nice strong liquid adhesive. At the top of the party hats, I put these Your Next Stamp Gumdrops. They are fun because they're sparkly, and I thought they'd be perfect for the top of the party hats. For the sentiment, I used Happy Birthday from this Concord and 9th Bits and Pieces stamp set. I've used this stamp set in a video before, and I'll link to it here if you would like to check it out. Along with the Happy Birthday from this, I used Party Animal, which is from the Furry Friends stamp set that these animals are from. I like to put different sentiments together to create a custom look. Now for the note card, I started with a piece of craft cardstock, and I cut it in half. So I have a 4 1/4 by 11 inch piece. I'm then scoring it down the center at 5 1/2. This is how I make my typical top folding note cards. But today this will be a side folding note card. And I'm going to cut the front of the card to be shorter than the back of the card. So I just placed my stamped piece in there to figure out how wide I want that front of the card. Once I have it figured out, I'm just going to cut the front of the card all the way up to the crease line. And then just like before, I'll use my scissors to cut along that crease or that fold line. This allows me to have a card where the front is shorter than the back, so that those little animal heads can hang off the top of it. So then I will glue my stamped panel onto the front of this, and the animal heads will hang off the top, just giving you a fun card design. If I wanted this to be a one-layer card, I could have done the technique I did in the last example, where I did the partial die cutting on the note card itself. To make the eyes stand out, I used a black glaze pen, and then Nuvo drops for the nose. And by the way, these guys look really cute with Google eyes, so that's another option that you can do too. So there you can see this final card. I really like having those fun little animals hanging off the top edge of the card. And of course, it still fits into an envelope nicely. If you want to skip the partial die cutting, you could have stamped the animals and die cut them separately and just glued them along the edge. But partial die cutting gives a really nice continuous look. Okay, my next example also shows using partial die cutting for a creative card front. Now for this one, I'm using the new Shine On stamp set and coordinating die set from Concord and 9th. This is such a creative set. Now the words come in the bold, the shadow, and the outline, so you can use them together or separately. The coordinating die works so well with this, and it cuts the word shine and a unique shadow that you can use along with the stamp set. There are many creative ways to use this set, so I'm going to use it on this card and one later in this video too. This time I'm using a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch white note card, and I have the shadow die of the word shine. I'm taping it in place and making sure I have enough room for the word bright underneath it. Again, we're going to do partial die cutting. This time I'm die cutting the bottom edge of this word. So I'll put the bottom part of the die, about half of the die, under the cutting plate, and leaving the upper half of the word shine hanging out of the cutting plate. So we'll only die cut the bottom part. Okay, so here you can see the partially die cut word. And then I will use a craft knife or a trimmer to cut the rest of this in a moment. While I have my supplies out, I'll cut the word shine from Gina K Peach Bellini cardstock and that same shadow die from Coral Reef cardstock. That's the die cut you see here. Next, I'm using this little sunshine die that is included in the Shine On die set. I'm just positioning it on the front of my card right around the E of the word shine. So I'm taping it in place and then running that through my die cut machine also. This will cut little slits for a sunshine, and I'll allow some yellow cardstock to peek through this a bit later. Okay, so now I can use my trimmer to cut all the way up to the cutting line of the word shine, and on the other side also. You could use scissors for this, or a craft knife and a straight edge if you prefer. So there we have a kind of funny looking partial die cut, but it'll come together soon. Now on to my shadow shine die cut here. This is that Coral Reef cardstock from Gina K. I'm going to stamp the Shine Shadow stamp from that Shine On stamp set. Stamping this with the Coral Reef ink, and this will look a little bit funny at first, but once we add the regular shine die cut on top, which I'm doing here, it'll really have a beautiful look to it. I'm using Gina K Connect Adhesive, which is a very good, strong adhesive that comes out of the bottle nicely and never gets clogged. And I'm placing that word shine right onto the shadow die cut. And then I will also cut a piece of yellow cardstock and add that into the inside of the card so that the bottom edge peeks out on the front of the card. I'm using Hero Art's Soft Vanilla ink, this is a great soft yellow, to add some rays onto the front of the card. This ray stamp is included in that Concord and 9th set. On the inside of the card, I am stamping the word bright, and I'll stamp this with that Coral Reef ink. I really like that the Gina K inks and cardstocks match perfectly, so I don't have to spend time finding the right colors. So I'm stamping bright, and then I will stamp the shadow, which lines up very easily. And the shadow I will stamp with the Peach Bellini ink. So basically I'm doing some stamping on the front of the card and on the inside, and all of it will show when the card is closed. Okay, so I did die cut from white craft foam the Shine Shadow die, and I'm gluing that to the back of our Shine die cut just so it has some dimension. You could use foam tape if you prefer, but this will hold up nicely in the mail. And then I'm gluing that onto the front of the card right up against our partial die cut edge. I decided to stamp a little yellow sunshine on the inside of the card also. Okay, so I added some little yellow gems onto the front of this, and I used my Tonic Aqua Shimmer pen to add shimmer to the Shine die cut. Now when you open up this card, I did add a little sentiment that says, "A little ray of sunshine to brighten your day," and that's from the Shine On stamp set also. I like how the yellow peeks through that little sunshine that's die cut on the front, and everything is nice and continuous since we used partial die cutting. And so look through your stash. You might have a large word die that would be great to hang off the edge of a card. Okay, my last card example actually doesn't have a die cut edge to it. However, it is a gatefold card design where the word die hangs off the edge. You could do this with a partial die cutting technique if you wanted to, but this saved time just to glue it in place. So let me show you how I did this. I used the new Concord and 9th Star Turnabout stamp set. I've shown how to use Turnabout stamps many times in past videos, but I'll show you quickly how to set this up. Once you set it up, you never have to set it up again. You just do the first time you get them. So I'm taking the stamp and I'm laying it with the stamp side down onto the packaging of the Turnabout. So I'm lining up the images. Then I'm going to draw with a permanent pen an X on the back of my stamp, right along with the X that's on that packaging. So I lay my T-ruler down and then I just draw a line. So here I'll do it again for the other part of the X. Draw a line right on the back of the stamp. And you'll never have to do that again, and that will help you to stamp perfectly every time. You will also need a 6x6 piece of cardstock with an X drawn in the center, connecting the corners. This is one I've made in the past. I'm just reusing it. I actually laminated it so I can use it over and over. Now I'm going to take my Turnabout stamp and place it right in line with the X. So the X on my stamp lines up with the X on my turntable, that white piece of cardstock. I'm going to use both the outside and inside for this card, but you could use one or the other if you prefer. You will need a stamp positioner for this. You can actually do it without a stamping tool, but I do find it's much, much easier to have a MISTI. Okay, I'm starting with the piece of yellow cardstock. This is Sweet Corn cardstock from Gina K. And I'm taping it right in the center of that turntable. Now for the first image, I'm going to stamp this with VersaMark Ink. So I'm using my anti-static powder tool, stamping it with VersaMark Ink, and then I'm going to emboss it with gold glitter embossing powder. Now this will give a beautiful sparkle to it, and then I will heat set this. Next, I will put the turntable back into my MISTI, but I rotated it one turn, and now I'm going to stamp again, this time with Wild Dandelion ink, a nice bright yellow ink. Now I'm going to rotate it one more time, and this time I'm going to stamp with Honey Mustard ink, which is a darker yellow ink. Instead of rotating one more time and stamping again, I'm going to use the coordinating Turnabout die. Now there are 3 stars in the center of my stamping and 3 stars in the center of the die. I'll line those up, and that makes it super easy to position this. So this time, instead of stamping stars in the open space, we're actually going to die cut some stars. So now we have these little die cut holes, which I think is really fun. I'm taking those little die cut stars and gluing them along the background just for added dimension. And by the way, I cut that piece down to 4.5 by 4.5. Next, I'm taking a piece of white cardstock that is 4.5 by 9, and I'm scoring 2.25 inches from each edge. So right here is 2.25. Flip it around and then score 2.25 again. Then we will just fold along those score lines, and the ends will meet together in the middle nicely. Next, I need to cut my yellow piece in half. So again, at 2.25. So I have 2 pieces that are 2.25 by 4.5. Okay, so now we can glue these onto the flaps of our card. I like that the white shows through those little die cut stars, and the ends meet together nicely in the center. So it looks like one continuous pattern there. However, we have the fun gatefold design. I cut a piece of white cardstock to 4 3/4 by 4 3/4, so I would have a nice mat to go on the back of this. You could skip that if you wanted to, but I like that nice white trim around the edges. For the word shine, I used gold glitter cardstock. Now this is new from Concord and 9th. They have this neutrals glitter pack. There's black, silver, white, and gold glitter in there. Die cuts beautifully and nice basic colors that you can use often. I'm putting foam tape on the top half of the word shine, gluing it right along that center line there, and you can see how the card opens up. So I didn't do a die cut edge, but instead I have the sentiment kind of hanging off an edge. I stamped Let Your Light Shine in the inside with black ink. And by the way, on that shine die cut, the shadow is die cut from white cardstock, and then I stamped the shadow images with the soft vanilla ink from Hero Arts. So there you have a bunch more ideas for die cut edge cards. I hope you'll give this a try. You really can use a lot of dies that you may already have on hand. If you like these supplies, I linked them below in the YouTube description. In the middle are a couple other videos with die cut edge cards. If you want to learn more, you can also head over to my blog. Thanks for spending time with me. We'll see you soon and have a great day.